This is a video on disassembling the V4-V5 servo saver assembly from the Arrma 6S line of vehicles. I actually think this is quite a good design. Once you work out the loading on the particular spring you have, how many shims, etc., then you can just disassemble to maintain your servo saver and reassemble without thinking about spring tension at all. So I think it's quite a good design. Once you have a method of being able to assemble and disassemble it easily, and that's what this video is about. So to do this, I'm going to need two of the 6x10x3 bushings, a 6mm screw, two 13mm spanners, at least one of which being open-ended, and a vise. Now a button head screw would be ideal because the rounded head can center inside these vice jaw cross recesses and that will keep it centered. I've only got a cap screw though, so I'll make do with that. Grease one side of the bushing to make sure it's that point that spins rather than the bushing inside the alloy of the servo saver. So we're going to compress between the head of the screw and the flat of the spanner, which will press on the ears of the servo saver, compressing the spring, revealing the flats of that hex and engaging the spanner. And I've used the thinner spanner this side because we only need to compress it a minimal amount, enough that we get good purchase on that hex. Luckily that hex just protrudes slightly, such that that can be lined up. And there's that corner to watch clears the spanner. So that hex can move in and out as the spring is compressed. The one thing we do have to be careful with is to always be sure to have a small amount of gap between the end face of the servo saver tube and the vice jaw, because if not, as we try and undo this thread, which will lengthen the tube, there's not going to be space inside the jaws. So we always have to have free space on this end, so as we undo it, that tube can unthread and lengthen. So what we'll do, as this is a finer thread than the vice thread, so we'll probably undo this around 2 rotations and then loosen off the vice by a half rotation. Then just orientate this spanner that holds the end so that both sides of the spanner get pressure from the vice jaw. And even when it's in position here, you can see through the open-ended spanner where the end of the servo saver tube is in relation to the vice jaw, and just stop compressing the spring whilst that end is still clear of the vice jaw. If it presses against the vice jaw, then the cylinder can't expand as you're trying to undo the thread that holds the two ends of the cylinder together. Get it all seated in there nicely and just gently firm it up and put a slight bit of pressure on it. If you don't see that spring compress instantly, make sure you've got the hex lined up properly, because otherwise you're going to damage the end of that hex. So the spring should compress easily, and we want to get a good amount of that hex flat into that spanner, and that should well and truly be enough. So now grab the remaining spanner and just break that Loctite, and it comes off quite easily. So now we don't need so much pressure on that hex, so we can loosen off the jaws, make a bit of space, and just loosen it up. Give it a bit more space and loosen it up, and just continue working like that. Good amount of space, and loosen up that hex. Okay, so gently remove that, pop out those bushings. Now it's all loosened up, should be able to just hold this, spin it off by hand. And there it is, all torn down. So once you're set up for this method, you can Loctite that servo saver and be able to tear it down and maintain it whenever you want. then it's just a set and forget system. You just pull it apart, maintain it, reassemble it. Plus, it's done up tight, Loctited, so you don't have to worry about it loosening while you're out driving either.